My dad has been using his kitchen table for his bills and paperwork for as long as I can remember. I came up with this plan with my mother to move him to this nook where I wanted to build a desk with some floating shelves. And this is what I came up with. On this project, I had a lot of undersized oak slabs that I wanted to piece together, and I had a design in mind, but I really didn't know how I was going to put each piece where to make it work. It really took some time to get every slab ripped down to the width I needed, cut down to length, and flattened with a router sled. A homemade router sled is a cheap and easy way to flatten a slab, but it makes a big mess and it's a lot of work.
Look at him go!
Okay, point taken. This is one of the slabs I ended up with after flattening it. They all had a lot of character, and I was kind of surprised each time I cut into one.
You never know what you're gonna get.
Once I had one flat side on each slab, I could use that as a reference on my planer and run it through to flatten the other side. Luckily here, I didn't mess up my blade or the track, but let this be a lesson on why to plunge the blade down before you get into the material. I decided to use some live edges in my design, partially to save lumber, but each slab needed one flat, straight edge to either be glued up to another slab or to go against the wall. When my track saw can't cut quite deep enough, it's fun to get out a handsaw and finish the job. Same thing with the hand plane. I'm far from an expert on sharpening or using it, but I try to get it out when I can, and that way I can keep learning and getting better. After flattening another slab, this one is going to end up being a shelf. One of the early shop projects I did was to build a theme baffle. It's a first stage chip separator for my dust collector. The shelves also had to be flattened and then ran through the planer. So I'm cleaning up the edges with the draw knife and sander, getting these live edges pretty enough to mount on the wall. This is a really nice tool to have if you work on a lot of live edge slabs. It's basically a drum sander that you can just roll around the side of the slab and cleans it all up and sands it nicely. It was a little bit of a struggle to find each slab and where they should go in this design and how thick and wide each shelf should be and the desk and which piece should go where, but in the end I'm definitely happy with how it turned out. Here I am with my third or fourth different variation of where each slab was going to go and which one was going to be the outside piece to keep the live edge. Before filling these defects full of epoxy, they need to be cleaned out to make sure the epoxy can bond properly with the wood. I finally stuck to the design I chose for the desktop, which required a good amount of epoxy filling for some of the cracks and voids. Then back to some more edge cleanup and some more planing. This slab ended up being my favorite of the wider pieces, especially after doing the epoxy fill. I decided to make it the outside piece on the desk. Just trying to get all these cracks filled with epoxy. This is my second time through and probably might have one more. Just filling it in, getting all the holes filled. Using these type of pieces of wood gives it some dramatic grain effect, but it's a lot of work getting all the cracks filled. This is a really cool trick I picked up from one of Bourbon Moth's latest tips and tricks videos. He basically says to build a small little router sled with your trim router. You set the bit to the same depth as some spacers, and then you can use it to trim off anything that's protruding from your surface. This was a really helpful tip. I've tried scraping, sanding, planing, a few different things, and this works really well. At this point, I wanted to start working on the frame of the desk. It needed to support the desktop, and also it needs to hold the drawers. This will all be hidden by the desk top and the drawer front, so I ripped 2x4 pieces down to the same width and decided how far out I wanted the support to come from the wall. This is the center support here. My thought is that it's basically supporting the drawers. The desktop will be supported by the back piece and the side pieces. The pocket holes will be to screw the side support pieces into the back support. Next, I went over to my mom and pop's. I cleaned up the nook I was going to be working with, and I got the shelf brackets installed and the desk support. Getting close to gluing the top together. This is where it's at right now. Trying to get this angle about the same as that I have in that nook. Pretty off square. See if I can match it. If not, I'll just have to rip it with the track saw on location to make it fit right. This is the line on the other side where I think it's going to line up. So I did recently replace the jointer knives, and that helped a lot. I did a whole cutting board video and didn't even use the jointer because my blades were so bad. I did use my Domino to line up the slabs for the desktop. You could also use a biscuit joiner. I totally recommend getting a Domino if you have the opportunity. So I planed all the desktop boards down to the same thickness, and I got a little excited and glued it all up. And I realized I still had some cracks in some of the slabs, so I filled them in with some Starbond CA glue. With the desktop all glued up and the cracks filled, I started focusing on the shelves. So I've adjusted this fence so it's straight across. Now I'm adjusting the height of this bit to cut the depth that I need. This is the small shelf. I'm going to use a small bracket. I'm going to cut from here to here. I got tape marking it out, just enough to recess this piece, and I'm going to drill the holes for the supports. When I was planning out this project, I wasn't really thinking about using the router table for this, but I'm really glad I have it because this made this job much easier. For this bigger shelf, I got the full length bracket. This didn't turn out super pretty and clean like some of the others I've seen, but it will all be hidden and it will give me a goal for next time. Drilling all these holes wasn't so bad. The kit with the brackets included a drill guide. I marked out where all the holes needed to be and drilled them with the guide, and then removed it to drill the hole the rest of the way to the depth that I needed. When discussing the design of this desk with my dad, he said he didn't feel like he needed drawers, but I didn't agree, so I built them. I got my drawer box sides done, so I just need to measure out what I need for the bottoms and cut those out. This one's upside down. It's got the dados for the bottoms. Pretty simple design. I use some dominoes, make it easy to click together. So sanding is no fun. I think I might never show it again in a video because no one wants to see it. But if you ever make drawer boxes, definitely sand before putting them together. When you're figuring things out as you go, like I usually do, it definitely helps to slowly cut things down and closer to size as you get closer to finishing the project. If you make cuts to the exact size right away and you change your mind or change your plans, you are in trouble. Just like the serving tray I made in my last video, for the finish I am using Rubio Monocoat Pure. I wipe it on with a white scrubby pad and then scrub it off with an old t-shirt or rag about 10 to 15 minutes later. It makes it easier to cut a white scrubby pad to fit your sander, and you can use that to buff it in. Definitely unhook your vacuum if you have one attached. My favorite thing about using this finish is that it's really hard to mess up, and I am good at messing up finishes. My next step is to add an outlet in the desktop. To add a recess in the desktop for the outlet, I built a small jig out of scrap plywood and then taped it to the desktop, and I used a template bit on the router to cut out the recess where the outlet needs to go. To construct this jig, I used some Tight Bond Quick and Thick glue to keep it held together. After marking out where I want this outlet to go, I use double-sided tape to attach the template to the desktop. With the template nice and secure, I figured let her rip, tater chip, and I went for it. I am happy with how this all turned out and how I completed it, but I should have drilled the Forstner bit hole sooner because it hogged out a lot of material. My template bit is pretty small for my router and it was taking a while to remove the material. Next, I brought over the shelves and desktop to my parents' house and did my best to get as far as I could before running into problems, and everything actually went really well. I got the shelves installed and the desktop. This is the first time using push to open drawer slides, but they went in pretty smoothly and I didn't have too much of a problem getting them installed. I swear the only time I make this face is when I'm concentrating super hard.
So you push it and release it. Give me a little bit.
I did have to turn the sound off on a lot of the section because my dad had the baseball game on, and when this video goes viral, I don't want to end up with a copyright infringement. Bringing in the desktop, it was definitely a tight fit. I didn't get the angles quite right, and there's a little bit more of a gap on one side that I liked, but for doing it by measurements, I'm really happy with how it looks.
Get my shit, put it on there now.
Next, I got the outlet installed, and then after that, it was back to the shop to finish up the drawer faces. My plan for the drawer faces is to cut a section out of here, hopefully resaw it and attach it to the drawers. I only have about 1 inch to work with, so hopefully the drawer faces will be 3/8 of an inch thick. I'm really hoping that's enough and they don't cup. I did eventually get this piece resawn. I do need a new bandsaw, and this blade is no longer usable. Trying to figure out how I want these drawer faces to look. I think each one's going to be around 26¼ or so inch long. I'm trying to match these up so it's going to look nice and smooth when they're next to each other as the two drawers. I did put a very slight chamfer on these drawer fronts, and then I put on some finish. Again, I'm using the same double-sided tape to install the door fronts. I basically just taped them on and then lined them up perfectly and put some screws in from the inside.
let you do your thing. You need a hand with anything, give us a holler, okay?